Hello arty peoples and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein and I'm your host this evening. Today is going to be a really fun, easy breezy class where I'm going to be showing you how to use our Charvin Water-Soluble Pastel painting sticks to make a landscape painting. And it's going to be really fun, very easy for anybody to do, and I really hope you guys have a chance to kind of play along while I'm doing this. Now, before I jump into everything that we're going to be going over, I just wanted to make sure that you guys know if you are interested in anything that I'm going over today, make sure to go to the website, JerrysArtarama.com, and type in today's class code, which is JL320. Now, if you type that into our search bar, our teacher's cart should come up with all of the things that I'm going to be using, and you can check it out that way. And, of course, before I really jump into the show, one little side note. Happy birthday, Amanda! Today is Amanda's birthday, so everybody out there, please give her some birthday love. Hit the like button, all that jazz, just to show her how much we appreciate her working behind the scenes moderating. As well as Frida, of course, we can't forget her. She's going to be over there as well on YouTube, so if you guys have any questions throughout the process, those are the two that you're talking to, and you can ask them. They will ask me live on camera here, and I can answer your questions. So, happy birthday, Amanda.
Thanks.
Yay! Alright, so, Charvin Water-Soluble Pastel Painting Sticks. It's a very long name. A really cool little product. This is actually Amanda's favorite, ironically enough. I didn't actually intend for that. Yeah, it's perfect timing. But these are really, really fun. They are, as the name suggests, a kind of a cross between watercolor and pastels. Now I'm gonna open this up here for you guys to see. I really do love the packaging. It's very like almost recycled brown paper kind of packaging, but it's really lovely. Very sturdy box when you get it. And this, if I open it up. All right, do you want to go to that overhead camera so they can get a? Oh, we have 1 second. All right. Oh, there we go. I was gonna say, when you open up the box, you're gonna have it covered in a nice layer of foam. So if you remove that, you get to see your first layer of pastels, which, ignore the fact that they're a little dirty, I've been obviously using them. And then, if you lift that layer up, you are gonna see a piece of paper, which I always have a hard time getting this up, mostly because I don't have any fingernails. Blame that on the pottery. Okay, there we go. If you remove the piece of paper, which is also there for protection, you'll see the second layer of pastels. So 48 colors in total within this set, and it is all really lovely pigmented colors. Now, I will say, in case anybody is wondering out there, there are no color names for any of these sticks, so if you're going, what color is that pink? I couldn't actually tell you. I also don't know what the pigment code is. It's just part of the information that we have from the manufacturer, but they are very lovely as far as the pigmentation. I'm going to show you the swatches here in a second, and they are also pretty high on the light fast rating, and they are really fun to work with. So I'm going to put that off to the side here. Now, also a little side note, I did reorganize these. I am a fan of putting things in chromatic order. Just because that's how my brain really functions well as an artist. So if I'm reaching for a green, I want all my greens to be together. And I want it to be in the scale from like white all the way down. And this is just me personally. So if you want to reorder your pastel sticks, you can. But actually, because this is the image that we're going to be working on today. This is not my reference image. This is the actual finished piece. I just wanted to show you guys so you know where our goal is. And I'll show you the reference image in a minute. But also, I do know for my reference image of that piece, Amanda and Frida do have the links for that image, and they can pop it in the chats for you guys to pull up the image that way. So, here, as my, make sure that's on camera. These are all my swatches, and if you take a little gander here, you will notice so that way, if I'm looking for this particular kind of peachy pink right here, I know where I need to go in my box to grab it. That is just me personally being a little OCD, but it's just getting myself organized where when I am in the middle of creating art. It's just not something that I don't have to think about. I can just very mindlessly grab what I need and go. And I do try to keep all of my pieces back where they belong when I'm using them and kind of throughout the show. Hold on. Hopefully that will be on camera. There we go. So if you take a look at my pastel swatches, what I did here is this is actually, if you guys have seen my previous pastel, my Charvin pastel painting sticks, I did a show on this with a more Claude Monet impressionistic piece. And these are actually the same exact swatches as that show, because it's the same product. But same way how I did it then was I put a layer of the pastel all the way down, heavier on the side, and I kind of faded it off that way. And then as you can see, they're split into two sections, right? So the top section, I left it dry, and the bottom section, I got it wet with water, just plain water. And I wanted to see how each one kind of reacts. So that way you can see the differences in your pastels, so when they're wet versus dry. There isn't really a color shift among any of them as far as like any noticeable difference or anything, which is what I love. I don't even think it's not even showing up on camera. Like they're pretty much identical. It is kind of weird with the camera. I see this right here looks a little bit more orange than this, but in real life it's identical, which is, camera is funny like that. Yeah, if I tilt it that way you can see. But yeah, so all of between the dry and the wet application, the color is exactly the same. Now, when it comes to, when you get these wet, let me actually grab a watercolor block. Now, this is what I'm going to be working on. This is not the piece that I'm going to be working on as far as the actual artwork. I just grabbed this so that I could show you a couple examples. But watercolor blocks are really great for these pastels. I like the cold press personally. Or I'm sorry, this is hot press. Either works great. I actually do prefer the cold press. I don't know why I didn't grab cold press. I think I meant to, but that's okay. Can you grab me one? Actually, if you can grab me the 10 by 14, that'd be lovely. Yeah, I prefer the cold press just because it has a little bit more texture. Hot press works great too. But when it comes to pastels, I like a little bit more texture with my paper. I'm not really a huge fan of the sanded paper, but that is personal to me. But these can also work on a sanded paper. Thank you so much. So there's the cold press, so it's got the silver. And I'll use this for my final piece here in a minute. All right, so if I pop this open, watercolor block, the reason why I like these for my pastel, the watercolor pastels, is that when I load this up with water, I know that all of the sides are taped down, or glued down, so my paper's not going to buckle on me and it's not going to go anywhere. I don't have to tape it down, anything like that. It's ready to go, and I love that. So a couple different applications for these pastels, right? You can apply them dry, no problem. And you can even get real heavy-handed. And these are pastels. You can absolutely use these just like pastels. You can blend them with your finger. You can use any kind of blending tool, a rag. They have all the different kind of like pastel blenders, tortillons, all of that will work. And if you need to, you can also erase back into it. Now the heavier you are, now I will say this does give you some pastel dust, if you can see that there. The heavier handed you are, the more pastel dust you are going to get. But that's the name of the game with dry pastels. These are not oil pastels, these are dry pastels. And they're kind of like a semi-hard pastel. Not quite as hard as a hard pastel, but semi-hard. We have a question?
We have two.
Okay.
Number one, do we think these would work well with pan pastels?
So these are really wonderful for mixed media. And yes, they will work with any other pastels. They will work with colored pencils. I'm pretty sure they would also work with watercolor, gouache, because it kind of goes into that realm as well. These are really a versatile medium that you can kind of play around with. And I will in a second show you the difference between this moving on paper versus a normal pastel, because I have those down here too, and I wanted to show you that. So, like I said, if you're a little heavier handed, it is going to be harder to erase rather than the softer version, but it will erase out like that as well. Let me get the pastel boogers, or the eraser boogers off of that, as well as the dust. Now, when it comes to pastels, one safety thing that I want you guys to know is that you do not want to ever go at your pastels. That will disperse the dust into the air, and now you are breathing that in, or anybody else who's in your vicinity. Pastels in general, these are pigment based, so that is something that you do not want to ingest. It is never a good plan. It's no matter what it is. But just a side note, if you do need to get the extra pastel dust off, tap it into a trash can. That's a very easy way to do it. I can also tap it onto my desk and then kind of wipe it up later, but don't flick it. That's the one thing you don't want to do. Now, I'm going to take my water and my Polar Flow brush, and I'm going to show you the difference between a light application, because it really does, once you get it wet, it moves really, really well, and the color starts coming out a lot better. So if you want a really light application, because this is kind of important to how we're going to start the piece, this is when you get your art supplies, I always suggest doing something like this. Just play around with them a little bit on a scrap piece of paper, whatever you have. And I see there's like a little bit of pastel dust up in this corner. If I start getting it wet, it also comes out. But if you start getting the heavier application, it's almost like I'm working with a really solid paint, and it starts getting really, really, really pigmented, and that pigment starts really coming out, which is really lovely. But you can see all of those scratchy marks from when I applied the pastel is almost disintegrating, which I really love. It doesn't completely go away if you're not scrubbing at the paper, but it's definitely one of those things where it really takes away and looks a lot more like watercolor. The really cool thing is that you can also go back and, like, here, I'll show you. That's on a dry. Same pressure. That's on wet. So that's me using a dry pastel onto wet, and that's me using it onto the dry. The other fun thing that you can do, and actually let me grab a different brush. I have the whole Explorer set of 6 here for my Polar Flow brushes, just because I wanted a smaller round for this purpose right here. So if I take this and I actually use it almost like a watercolor pan, you can actually use it just like you would like a thing of watercolor, like a dry pan of watercolor. It's really lovely. Now, once you get these wet, it is a little bit difficult to move it afterwards. So this really soaks into your paper. This is one thing, unlike watercolor, this tends to get into your paper and it doesn't like to lift very well. Because if I were to, I mean, it's still kind of wet. While it's wet, you can maybe pick up a little bit, but it's not really something that's going to lift like a watercolor would.
Would you say that's the main difference in like that and any other brands of like watercolor sticks specifically?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. This is going to be more permanent once you get it wet. So like if you are playing with a watercolor stick, that is essentially a watercolor in stick form. This is not that. This is a pastel that has gum arabic added to it, so it moves more like watercolor, but it's still a pastel. So when it's dry, it goes back to being kind of like a pastel. And here, I can probably, if we go to that side camera, I might be able to grab just the corner, the sharp corner of this, and I might be able to show you really detailed, more what I can do for the wet versus the dry, I guess I should say. Can we go to that side camera? Sorry. Is it not?
You're fine, you're fine.
Can we go to the side camera? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no. I think they're dealing with some audio issues. I'm not entirely sure, but everyone, always round of applause for the Katie being awesome and handling all the streaming things on the back. All right, so I'm gonna shift this out of the way so you guys can really see. Here we go. Let's go with maybe this dark brown right here, because I think that's really in focus right now. So the dark brown, if I erase, I know I can erase out the top because that is all dry pastel and it's going to erase out like a pastel would, right? I can erase that out. That side right there is not really wanting to move. Now, once you get more into the pastel side, I am starting to pick up, you can see I'm starting to pick up some of that pigment because I call these eraser boogers. There's really no other great name for them. These right here, they're starting to turn a dark brown, and this is getting a little bit lighter, but not so much that you're going to be able to really notice. There we go, get that out of the way. But if I wanted to fix that, I can go back in and pick this back up and kind of move it around just a little bit more, but still not going to move around like it did the first time I ever got it wet. So that's the biggest difference between these, and these are also still very much like that gritty pastel. Here, let me try and get a clean finger here. So yeah, here you go. If I were to pick up my finger and kind of go across the dry side, you see how I'm picking up pastel because it's still a dry pastel. Now if I take my next finger and do that over here, it's gonna happen, but on like a much lesser side. So that's why it's still a pastel, but it is kind of more permanent once you get it wet. So that is a huge thing to know when working with these. And I personally love it because I like to do, and this is how we're going to approach this right here. What I like to do is I like to do my background. So I'm working from my background forward. I like to do my background, and I like to get the whole thing wet, and I like to really get it set in there, and then I start doing layers on top, and it really helps you kind of push and pull, and it's really going to help us get that kind of airy feeling of the trees in the background kind of a thing. So let me pull up my watercolor block, and here's my reference image, right? It is a bunch of really dark trees with, you can see these right here are the trees that are kind of going off into the mist, and it almost looks, on camera I'm not sure if it's coming across, it looks almost like a peachy brown, which is really fun. And then like, cause that's totally different from what I'm seeing in real life. Cause hold on, we're gonna switch this. There we go. All right. So in real life, what I'm seeing is there's little peaks of green in there. So if you pull this image up on your computer, and this, by the way, is a royalty-free image. Always work with royalty-free images. So in case anybody does not know what that is, that means that I have permission to use this image for my artwork, because whoever took this photo, that is their artwork, and they own that rights to that image. So if I use this and I don't have permission, I can get into some legal issues, which I don't want. So royalty-free images, always fantastic. If you want to find, there's a bunch of websites out there, just search for royalty-free images and they'll come up. But this, if you pull this up on your computer, you can really see a little bit more color. So like there's greens going in there. It definitely has that peachy feel. And then like right here, maybe it's just me, I'm seeing maybe some like reds, which is the opposite of the greens that are going in there. That's like a yellowy green. There's a lot of really fun colors that are hard to see for you guys on camera. So I would always suggest pulling them up on your computer. It helps you to kind of really see those colors a little bit better. But I'm going to put this right over there because as you can see, clearly between the reference image and my final piece, I saw a lot more blues in here. And I did use black at the very, very end, but you don't have to. I prefer to use a lot more color in my pieces, which is why they always look a little bit more technicolor than in real life. But that's personally me. So let's get started on this. And again, if we have any other questions throughout the show, pop them in the chat, and Amanda and Frida will ask me.
The only current one I have is, would these work with an alcohol wash instead
of
water?
That's a great question. Great question, and I almost forgot to show you guys this. All right, so here I'll use this. We have some regular pastels here, right? I wanted to show you guys a big difference between regular pastels. These are, soft pastels. So these are soft pastels. These are softer than this. So first off the bat, you would think that this would move a lot easier, right? So this is the Mungyo Gallery Soft Pastels. They're really lovely, lovely colors. This is just a red that I'm grabbing here. I'm gonna grab some water and move it around, right? You can move regular pastels with water. Now I'm gonna grab a different red in the Charvin, right? Not exactly the same color, but, and I'll do it a more up close. Here. Hopefully that will come in focus. Okay, so this is the Charvin. You can see how all of the strokes of me scrubbing that pastel on there, they're almost gone. It's completely disintegrated into what I would call like a watercolor. Again, it's still a pastel, so it's gonna have that pastel feel once it's dry, but like this right here being the soft pastel, and I just moved it around with water, you can still see every single part where I touched that pastel to this paper. Those like scratchy marks into the paper is never gonna go away. Now, what somebody was asking as far as the alcohol, right? Rubbing alcohol. So I'm gonna use the same two colors. Oh, I think it was this one. Yes. Same two colors, same two brands, right? And isopropyl alcohol. This is 91%. Let me just grab a little bit here on my brush. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to dip in. Right? So isopropyl alcohol moves around really lovely, but it's already dry. And once it's dry, you cannot get it to move around at all ever again. It's in there. It ain't moving. Same thing for the Charvin. That's as far as I can move it. Like you can see, I have a lot of it on my brush, and it's like I'm dipping in there, dripping, and this is as far as I can move it. So as far as isopropyl alcohol is concerned, yes, it works. But look at the difference between how far I can move this versus the isopropyl alcohol, and now this is stuck into your paper. It's not moving, not at all. Same thing with this. That's as far as I can get it. So yes, it works. Not my favorite. So, yes, we have another question?
One last thing.
Yeah.
I'm looking into it on the site, but I can't find it. On the packaging, does it say if it's AP certified or non-toxic?
I believe it is. I think that's one of those things that I asked the manufacturer, and I think they actually emailed me back and going confirmed, yes, it's AP certified non-toxic. Because otherwise I would be using it with my hand. I think I did that for the last show. So I know it's AP certified non-toxic, but I would have to go back and double check my emails from a while ago. But yes, I believe it is AP certified non-toxic. But I don't think it actually says it on the box.
It doesn't say on the site either, so we need to get that probably added.
Yes, we're gonna have to talk to our website people. So, all right, so I have my watercolor block and I have my reference image. I'm going to start with, like I said, the background forward, because I want to make sure that I get that ethereal kind of foggy situation going on, where my trees go into kind of like nothingness and it fades out, right? So I'm going to start off with this really fun peachy color, which is down here. Again, there's no color names, so I'm also not going to be perfect with this. I might not get this in the right exact spot. It does not matter. It's okay. No one's going to know. This is an organic tree field thing, and if you get it slightly off on the scale, no one's going to know. It's still going to read as trees with a nice little foresty path. So I'm going to say it's like right there-ish, right? So I'm going to be real light on my application on this side because I want it to just fade into nothingness. But remember, this is still very pigmented, so a little goes a long way. And I'm going to kind of start getting a little bit more heavier as I go this way. Because I look at this and I know it's kind of going up that way, and I can sort of see a little bit through the trees there, but sort of that. Now my goal with this first layer is to completely obliterate most of the white of my paper, with the exception of right here. Right here, if you look, ignore these trees on top, right here is what appears to be like a white kind of part of the image. Now, technically speaking, if I already covered that with a color, you can go back there as a white pastel. And again, if you want to work with other pastels, because this isn't like a super crazy stark white, it is a white, but it's not as strong as like the Mungyo pastels. I know those have a stronger white. I'm aware of that. But this is one of those colors that like can appear almost gray on the color of this white. It's just different shades of white, so that's one of those things that when you put them side by side, you're gonna see the difference, but this is the white pastel, so it's something to keep in mind. And so I'm gonna kind of go in to just the bottom, because I want it to fade off into nothingness, but I want to kind of save, this is where I'm kind of working like a watercolorist, and I want to save the whites of my paper for that like area for it to pop up in. So actually, before I get it wet, I want to add in a little bit of purple, because I want it to appear, I don't know, I feel like purple's the right choice. I'm in my purple era. Yes, Amanda, that was for you. Yeah. You and your Taylor Swift moments. Okay, so now that there's a little bit of purple, and I'm not going to knock off any of this extra dust either, because once I get water on it, it's going to be a watercolor. So, I'm dabbing, like you can see I'm literally just dabbing the water onto this, because if I hold my brush kind of like this is a bit like a Bob Ross moment where it almost gives you like the tree texture. Yes, I did that. But I'm also just kind of dabbing the water into that and moving those pigments around just enough to where they get saturated with the water and start dissolving without moving too far. Because I don't want them going anywhere. I want them right here, but I don't want to have to scrub at my paper. So that dabbing motion will absolutely do that. Now,
if you were going to enter this into like a judged exhibition, would you call this a watercolor or a pastel?
Yes. Because this is technically a pastel. The way that I finish it is more like a pastel. But it tiptoes into both realms. I don't think they would accept this for a watercolor show. It's very far removed from a watercolor show, so I don't know if they would. You can ask them, but I doubt that they would be lenient for that. You know, just because it is so opaque, I think is the issue. So I have my base layer down right there. Now I'm going to ignore that while it dries, and I'm going to address the rest of this. Now, if you look at this photo, one thing you can actually notice is that every corner is darker. Every corner, which tells me somebody probably put a filter on this photo. The one that the vignette that makes all the corners dark. I'm okay with that because I think it looks lovely. But that means I want to do that with my image, and so I need to make the corners a bit darker. So I'm going to use the lightest gray that I have down here, and I'm going to just touch it into the corners where I get heavier in the corner and lighter as I go out. Now remember, that's wet, so it's going to be a lot more pigment that's coming off, so I'm kind of real light on that one. Let me just rub it into the corner, and it's going to be almost like I'm doing a circle all the way around. But this gray is the wrong color for this, so I'm not going to touch that just yet. We're still working on the background. Whoop. Now, these pastel sticks are this long. If that's uncomfortable for you, you can break them in half. I've known many people to break them in half. Like the first thing they do when they get a pastel set is to break them in half. I've even had teachers tell people that they have to break them in half. You don't. You can work with them long if you want to. But if it's more comfortable for you, please make whatever works best for you what you need to do for your artwork, because that's the more important thing. All right, so I'm just touching a little bit more of that purple back in. Now, I kind of want to do a little bit, like I said, I see a little bit of that green kind of in there, that range. And actually, you know what? I take that back because that's still very wet. I'm going to not do that, but maybe we do a little bit of this light, almost like a Naples yellow, because I like that. And I want to kind of incorporate that up here just a bit. Because it almost looks like it's like that dusk kind of from gray to yellow, where it just starts like the world starts waking up, almost a thing. And I'm going to start with the lighter areas. So yes, I'm kind of working in like a bit of a circle. And I want to have this fade off into, that's why I use that yellow, because I want it to kind of just fade off into that area. And I'm using a lot of water. So I might have to hit this with a bit of a dryer, which because I got everything wet, and all that pastel dust is saturated, that would be the only time I would suggest you hitting this with a dryer, because same concept is like blowing on your pastels. If you have pastel dust that has not been set with water, it's going to disperse into the air, and you do need to mind that.
Oh, a quick question. I
Yes.
think we have someone following along. So
Yay.
they were wondering if their orange colored area is really light, should they keep going for now or try to get more color in before they move to the next step?
That is going to be dependent on how you feel. You can always add more later, but if you like the lightness of it, yours doesn't have to look exactly like mine. So it's entirely up to you. Now I'm also going to start dabbing mine with a bit of a rag here, just a cotton rag, clean, just because I'm trying to pick up the water there, because I want to go back into that area. Just so you guys can see. If yours isn't this dark, that's okay. I just want to remove the whiteness of the paper from that area, and I want to kind of make it that tingy peach kind of color. So once that dries, I just dabbed that. It's not fully dry yet. So if I start going on top of that, my pastels are going to activate, and it's going to give me a lot of pigment. I do have a hairdryer, yeah. I was gonna try and see if I could avoid using that for just a second, but because I would rather it dry naturally and also not have the sound of that.
It's not that bad.
Okay, it's. Yeah. I was like, I don't want to sit here with a hairdryer, you guys. That's terrible.
It's not that bad.
But so as you can see, I kind of did before I actually jump into that. I do have a lot of water on the outside of this. Now I do have that white pastel that I can then take and kind of go back in. Again, it appears almost gray just because of the whiteness of this paper still coming through. But I do want to hit that with water before I grab the hairdryer. Okay. And if you grab a different color, if you're following along, if you grab a different color and it's not exactly the same thing as me, totally fine. I'm also not super worried. You see how my color isn't like the perfect gradient here or here? That's okay, because I have a whole lot of trees that are gonna cover it. It's fine. No one's gonna know. We just really want this area is kind of the more important thing of what we're doing right now. So I'm gonna grab my hairdryer and just hit this with a little bit of move that over here. Pastel dust is not, we don't need that. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of a hairdryer just to kind of speed up the drying time. So, I don't know if they can hear me. It's one of those things. The social tends to counter out the sound of the hairdryer, but I'm gonna try and be as fast as possible here. Not say anything too important. Mostly want to get this section dry. Also, if I am moving quickly, for those of you following along at home, You can always pause or rewatch and ask me questions later, because we always make sure to go back through and answer questions if we missed it during live. So don't stress, I will always answer. Okay, so again, not perfectly dry, but it's dry enough. And I want to use, I got this like lemony yellow, the lemony green out of all my greens, because they start here and go here. This is the one that's the most yellow, and I also broke it in half. That's on me. So I have that one, because if you look at the reference image, it's real bright yellow, like a yellow-green through here, and there's a little peak here through the tree. The one on the tree we are going to ignore for now. That'll be at the very end. But the ones that are here for the bushes, I want to kind of put those bushes in before I actually put in that tree. Again, we're working from the background forward. So I'm going to put those bushes in. It is a very bright green. Now, if you look at this, as those bushes go off into the distance, they go to that like funky peach kind of color. So I want to have that transition go as I get there. So I'm gonna say, let me find the bottom of this. I'm gonna place that because the top of my bushes are here. So if I have that right about there. Again, if it's not perfect, it's okay. I'm gonna say the bottom of the bushes are right there. So there's one that kind of goes up like that. There. There's a little bit there. And it starts getting lighter. Notice how my marks are getting lighter. I don't want to scrub that green in, because I would then be working against the green, which you can do. If you find you put too much color down that you didn't want, you can get it wet, let it set in, get it dry, and then you can go on top of it, and it's less likely to affect your colors on top, which is why I really love these pastel sticks, because they don't work like a watercolor in that sense. You have a question?
Do you find that they dry lighter or darker?
So there's not really much of a color shift. Like I was saying here with the pastel swatches, they're almost identical. So
maybe like slightly lighter from what I remember, but it's not bad. It's not really...
so much that you're really gonna be like, oh, that's totally different color. Mm-hmm. It's very, very similar. And remember, you also, once you get it wet, you're removing all of the white little specks that are showing through. Like this right here, there's a lot of white that shows through that. So that green is gonna take over and completely obliterate all of the white that's in that area. So then you're going to no longer see that. Now I'm going to use this, it looks kind of like a yellow ochre to me. Again, there's no technical names here. I'm just going to kind of touch it in a couple of the trees here. Just right here in the center. And then I'm going to also touch it down here in my bushes, because I want it to kind of fade off into that like peachy area. But I think the green in this peach would make mud, and I don't really want that. So I'm going to have that yellow be a bit of a transition color. And once I get this wet, we'll see what it does, and then we can always fix it later. All right, so now I will say, with the lighter areas of the bushes, because they're like that yellowy green, I'm actually going to go on top of this green with the yellow, just where I see a lot of the sunlight hitting it. So like if this branch wasn't here, I would imagine that all of this chunk right here is in sunshine. So I'm just gonna put it in some sunshine. And sunshine tends to be a yellow light, so when it hits objects, it tends to turn it a little bit more yellow rather than white. That's a really great way of showing your light and your sunshine values without making things look chalky. So there's a little bit that kind of goes down this bush right here. So I'm gonna go there and kind of just a dab here and there until, again, it fades off into nothingness. And there's a little bit right there-ish. I'm not being precise with it, just wherever I see it. Now I do want to address this area as well, because it's kind of in the same realm. Also just looking at the time, making sure how we doing. All right, so this area, if I, again, ignore this tree and ignore this right here, I'm just imagining this little like passageway. If I took off the tree and these like bushes that are really close to us that we can see in detail, just that foggy area, it tends to be a lot like this. So I'm gonna kind of mimic the same thing, but I can see one little bush that kind of is starting to come into detail, and then it kind of starts to come into those, like the more foliage that we can tell what's going on, because it is much closer to us, but it does have a green tinge to it. So it does have a greenish yellow tinge. So I'm gonna Naples yellow, or the yellow ochre kind of color it up a little bit too, just to kind of change that value, especially from up here. I want it to be a little bit darker. Now, I also really, call me crazy, but I swear I see a little bit of pinks in here. So I'm going to actually grab a little bit of pink and touch it into the trees. I know, it's crazy, right? But here's the thing, this is art and there are no rules. So, add a little pink there, maybe a little bit there, and that's where that's going to go. Now, I'm going to grab a smaller brush. I don't want the smallest round that I have though. I want to actually use this round. 12 round. I don't want this huge, gigantic flat brush, even though I always am married to a brush, let's be honest. Don't be married to a brush, use the tools that you need. I'm going to use this, and I'm going to just do the same thing that I did before. A little bit less water. I just dabbed it on there and I realized there was too much water on there, so I dabbed it onto my rag. And I'm just going to, again, dabs, that's all I'm doing. Just a little dabby dab. And as I am depositing the pigments over here, if I wash my brush off while it's still wet and kind of pull that out just a little bit, it fades it off into nothingness. So it's ethereal. It's that scary foresty tree kind of path that's going on. Now remember, I saw greens and things in here, and I have not actually touched that yet, and that's okay. We're gonna get there. Layers is the name of the game with this. So, and here's the thing, I don't even think we're gonna get to like all of the final layers for this today, and I'm gonna kind of rush through it a bit, but you can do as many layers as you want with this stuff. It's so much fun because you can dry it, add more, add water, dry it, and keep going because it is very, very opaque. So there's my trees. Now I am going to go back to that big flat brush. This is a 3/4 inch flat brush. And I'm going to get, again, not a ton of water, but I'm going to start solidifying where these bushes are. And I'm doing little dabs again, and I'm going to actually bring it all the way over to the edge here. I'm not really trying to cover it up, I'm just trying to remove the white of that paper. Alright, and you can see that green is already covering what was already there. It's really, really, really opaque if you put down a good amount, and you could almost do glazes with this. If you put down a thinner layer and work that way. So I'm just working one particular way. If it works better for you to do a thinner layer, or even use these as almost like a watercolor palette and pull the color off the sticks, then put it on, you can absolutely do that. Now, again, I'm going to do like what I did up here and clean my brush off while it's still very wet and just dab and kind of scrub that peach area just to kind of get that mark where I put the pastel down and kind of have it fade off into nothingness. Now, since I have green on my brush, I can do a little bit up here, almost like a glaze. Now, I know this kind of looks like mud, and that's okay. I made mud, but it's beautiful mud. And we're gonna add more later. So it's just a light layer, just little indications here and there for a little green color sparkling through. Right, and I'm not doing any hard lines over here because again, it's that like fluffy, like the, what is it, the fog is rolling in kind of a thing. I don't want there to be any hard lines right now. Now the hard lines are gonna come when you get to the foreground, once that foggy area kind of melds together and gives you more detail, which is somewhat right here on the edge. So if you wanted to do a hard line there, you could, and it kind of sort of comes off that way. Again, just more of a notation for me for later. All right, now, I don't really love the like lime green that I put in there. Here's the thing that you can do. I have this more bluish green. It looks almost like a viridian. I'm gonna actually come back in and touch that in on top of that green. And I kind of want to also put a little bit more here. So I want it to kind of fade out into that green. Let me use this round, 12 round. And I'm going to, because it is wet, I'm going to also go into that because since that area was wet, it's going to be harder to move that pigment around if I leave it there for too long.
Do you find if you use too much water that these bloom like watercolors do, or what do you find?
Yes and no, because they don't quite move like watercolor. That's the hard part to describe. It's a really unique kind of feel because it's not a watercolor and it's more of that pastel.
I honestly feel like it's like elegant smudging. Like
yes, I feel like elegant smudging is a great way. Because like I just added a bunch of water to that, but my pastel pigments don't want to move. Like they're more stuck into the paper, especially like I said, the underlying layers that I already did. I just did layers and layers and layers on top of that, and they're not moving at all. So it's one of those things where I'm like, no, not really. But we're gonna let that dry, and I'm gonna start attacking the bottom half here because that definitely needs to dry. But I do love how that kind of viridian green makes that go off into the distance. And again, remember, I'm putting a tree there, so this is just the background. So I'm gonna go with like this burnt sienna kind of color, and Katie is yelling at me that I'm gonna be running out of time. So I'm going to pop this in because there are some burnt siennas kind of up in this tree, and I want to kind of darken my bushes and stuff that are kind of like coming up in the foreground here. Technically think it's on a cliff face where it's like rocks, and I'm going to start moving a lot faster because I don't want to run out of time. But for the ground here, this is actually really easy. I'm going to take this burnt sienna. This is why I don't like to break my sticks. Lay down a whole layer. And I'm gonna get it, well, before I actually get it wet, I'm gonna do a couple layers of this. This is like a yellow ochre, again. Kind of fade it off into that. And it kind of goes up. Now, yellow ochre is a more neutral color, but it is kind of a yellowy color. So it tends to have a sunshine effect where it looks like it almost has like a bit of sunshine hitting this. And I don't want it to look like there's sunshine everywhere. I'm using like a light pale yellow here. And then I'm actually touching a bit of orange because it looks orange to me, right? All right, so maybe this kind of pale blue-green bushes over here, because I have a lot of lovely greens that I want to use. Technically speaking, as things get back further, they do tend to appear more blue, but this is definitely a weird kind of peachy fog scene. So I'm gonna get my water and just mix everything kind of up and also get all of this wet so that we can take care of the white of this paper. See, it's like a burnt sienna. And yes, that is a lot of water. Whew. More than I intended, but that's okay. Now I'm gonna actually get a little bit of that off my brush so that I can pull more of that yellow. But again, I'm trying to just remove the white of the paper. So if I see any whites peeking through, I'm gonna kind of dab them out and get them out of here. All right. This is what we always end up calling panic painting when I start moving real fast.
I was just thinking you were panic painting.
I'm not panic painting technically, but a little
Close.
bit. It's a little. All right, so again, I just dab that out to where it looks like it fades into nothingness. And then I'm gonna kind of move this around just to kind of get that green in there. Now that is my base layer. This is where I would definitely let it dry fully before I usually continue. We don't have the luxury of that time, and I did not actually prepare a pre-done one like I normally do. I thought I would have gotten to this stage faster, but that's okay. So we're just gonna keep jumping through, and I'm going to start laying down these dark greens where I see like little shadows amongst my, like the bushes and trees and stuff. And I'm not gonna go any further past this because everything else past that goes into nothingness, right? All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of this over here. So there's a dark little bush here, one that has like little twigs. I like to use the corner of my pastel here to just do like little twig mark things that aren't actually twigs at all, but like it looks like there's a little bit of a foliage because your brain reads that as foliage. All right, now let's do a darker brown just to kind of tone down this burnt sienna because that is orange. And because we got rid of all of the white of this paper, and this paper is textured because it is the cold press. Although this should do it with a hot press as well. But as I scratch this in, it's gonna give me that texture right like this that almost reads as like rocks and dirt, which is really fun. And there is definitely a rock right here-ish that looks very dark. And if I do little hints of things here and there, like there's a rock here, little stones, there's a rock there, might not be the exact size, but that's okay. There's one there. Again, I'm pretty sure this is on a rock face. And then a tree's kind of growing out of it, right? Now, I'm gonna grab a dark purple because I need shadows, but I don't want to go with black because that tends to kind of really desaturate and take over all of my colors, which is why I typically don't reach for a black. I reach for like dark blues and purples, and they will darken the value, just like you can see all the shadows, but it won't desaturate everything and have you fighting those colors. Now I will say this looks, again, still less orange, and this is where I get those shadows in the corners as well. Dark purple. All right. Okay. I think this is definitely more desaturated than that orange, so I'm gonna go with this like grayish. It's the color of my shirt, actually. It is almost an identical match. Grayish. This one's for you, Katie. And I'm gonna go on top. And this is where I'm start starting to work more like a pastel artist rather than a watercolor. Base layer is watercolor, top, upper layers are more pastel. So that's why it kind of blends really well from the two sides of this. So if you're someone who kind of teeters into both realms and likes pastels and likes watercolors, this is such a fun medium for you to play around with. Yeah, so you see that I'm starting to desaturate that really well. I don't like how light that got, but I will go back over that little rock area with a darker color. And since it is AP certified non-toxic, I am going to actually use my hands to scrub out a little bit of this, because I do have a lot of like little pastel dust things that are accumulating, and if I rub them into my paper, they're part of my art, not extra. But if you don't like the extra pastel dust, you can always knock it off into your trash can. I'm going to actually do a little bit of that right now. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we got a foreground. All right, so, ooh, I got pastel dust on my reference image. So I need to kind of address that area. It's very green, a little bit too limey green kind of a color. So I want to kind of go in with this like more desaturated gray green. And starting to place the foliage that is on this tree right here. Sorry, that was a little bit off camera. Just because I need to start getting that in there. Now, if you want to add in all of the little details, this is one of those mediums where it's really hard to get very detailed as far as like rendering every little leaf or all the little forms that you see. This is going to be more of a impression. That's why the last time I used these on a show, I was doing an impressionistic kind of Claude Monet inspired piece, because pastels, well, specifically these, and I know there's always somebody out there who's going to do really incredibly detailed things with pastels, but in the scale that I'm working with these right here, it is not the easiest thing to get that detailed with these. So it's one of those things where if you want to get detailed, you're going to have to scale up, or you're going to have to take the time to really render out all those little details, and it's a lot more work that I'm going to be able to have on the show here. So now I'm going to, is this a darker? No, that's the same green. This is like a Viridian green, not the color I was looking for. Actually, I'm going to start putting in these trees because, ooh, yep, we're running out of time. So I'm going to start putting these trees really fast. I'm using a dark blue, and I'm going to kind of pop in. These are actually, this is why I really love the whole long pastel, because I'm doing these like quick, like movement. So it gives you that impression of like the almost branches kind of coming through without having to draw every little thing. And I'm paying attention to where there's like really big chunks of dark. Now I think y'all kill me if we run over time, but I think this is going to be probably the only tree I'm going to be able to put in. It would be the same exact thing for the other side, but I think we're only going to have time to show you the one. But it's the same exact approach as far as like, I can show you a couple of, like, these would be more of like a dabby scribble, whereas like this is that long kind of almost like a brush stroke.
Could you talk about finishing this piece and potentially framing or not framing it?
I am glad you guys asked. That is a great question.
Or
So,
varnishing or not varnishing?
yeah. Yes, that's a huge question usually. For me, I personally never varnish my pastels. The reason why is because it typically, once you varnish them, it gets like this weird haze on your pastels that are not, after you do all this work and your pastel piece is hazy, it's really frustrating. So it's one of those things that I typically choose not to. So the other option would be to frame it under glass. Now there is actually an entire show Amy did on framing pastels where you have this little extra piece that you put in that keeps your pastel from touching the glass and gives it a little bit of a buffer, which is really great. So that's a really great show for you guys to watch if you're wanting to frame pastels yourself. You can always bring it to a framer. I know that is a bit expensive though, so you can always DIY. I always suggest DIY. I love it. And that way you really understand the things that are going to go into what it takes to frame your pieces, you know? But it's one of those things that if you are going to do varnish, I would suggest spray varnish. The reason why I'm hesitant with that is because it's really difficult to spray varnish pastels in general. These are water-soluble pastels, so I still have not actually varnished one of these. I should definitely do that after the show. Maybe I'll varnish one of these that I'm going to be finishing here. I'm also using, this is the time where I'm using black, by the way. Just to kind of, I'm not going over every little branch, but I'm just trying to darken some of the areas here. But yeah, no, if you varnish a water-soluble thing, I don't know if the water solubility would affect it, like start moving kind of a thing. So that's one of those things that I just don't have the answer on. So framing would be probably your best bet under glass, and then if it's a normal pastel, I always suggest you test it on a scrap piece of paper with your same pastels, with the pastel varnish that you have on hand. There's a lot of really lovely varnishes out there that are in spray form. Of course, always take precautions when you are doing that. Kind of buff out the black here a little bit. But it's just one of those things that personal preference, my personal preference is to not. So there you go. Now, I did the blue and then I did black just to kind of darken those tones. Now, to quickly show you how I would show a little bit of highlight, like I was saying, the highlights on the trees, especially on the one on this side, because I would approach this in the same manner, just different brush, like pastel strokes. I would kind of probably more dab it on and scratch it, because it's a different type of leaf. But to show the highlight, that lime green is really great, just as like a little bit of a pop. Again, not exactly perfect, but they'll understand kind of what I'm suggesting. There might be a little bit here. So it just looks like the light's hitting just the top of this. And if I really wanted to, I could go with a little bit of a yellow, like this is a really pale yellow, almost like a pale Naples yellow.
If you were desperate for those details, could you go in with like a pastel pencil?
You absolutely can. And that's actually, here, I think I even have like a pencil here. So if you wanted to, you can absolutely kind of come in and do this is just graphite. And I'm going to hold this up in a minute here. So here, right there. You can see all my little graphite marks. That's the same way with a pastel pencil would do, about the same. It would be really lovely on top of this. Again, those are not water soluble, so it will move a bit because they are still pastels like the other one, but they won't move as much as this would. And you could also absolutely go in like a watercolorist and use a thinner brush to get little details and branches and things like this. Now, I am sorry, I did have to kind of rush through the process a bit because I know we just were running out of time. But this is just to kind of give you an inspiration and give you an idea of what the product, what this can do. You can see my brush marks here, so it gets a little bit more detailed. That's what I do love about these, is that they can kind of teeter into that watercolor realm. So you could get the details if you really wanted to. And the pencil, graphite is great on top. Jerry's Jumbo Jet would be a great one too. Comes in white, sepia, sanguine, and black. And then we have all kinds of different pastel pencils as well that would go on top of these. But again, just not going to move as much as the other one would. So I know this is not 100% done. You can kind of see, other than the tree that kind of blocks off this. There you go. That's the goal. Here, it's like it happened. Haha. Right? Katie's laughing at me right now. So it would be the same thing on this side. And I mean, I would add it in, but they'd kill me because we'd be here for another like 20 minutes. But it's the exact same process to get the other tree in there. And if you want to add in a little bit more details, and you know, you can add in a little bit more of the white highlights. That's what I do love about this, is that it has that opacity that is really lovely, and you can kind of work back and forth from dark to light or light to dark. In the watercolor sense, you can always do all kinds of different things. This is a really, really fun medium, and I really hope you guys get a chance to play around with them. For those of you who have been playing along tonight, I know I kind of rushed through the process and got a little stuck in the background, sorry. But please show me what you guys did. I would love to see it. We have our Jerry's Live Facebook group that is free to join. You do have to answer that one security question or else you don't get in. But if you do join, please post your artwork there. I would love to see. It always makes me very happy to see your guys' work. If you have any questions also on the process, or on like, hey, this is what I did and it's not working, if you post it there, I'm not the only person who would also respond. We have over 7,000 people in the group, and they're all artists, and they all range from beginner to very professional. So it's a really lovely group of people just coming together to create artwork. So please feel free to join and post your work there. Always makes me happy. Again, if you are interested in anything that I was showing you today, JerrysArtarama.com, type in today's class code, JL320. That will bring up our teacher's cart and all the things that I've been using. And of course, also join us next week, because Mott will be back and is going to be talking about drawing people in perspective, which hurts my brain, but I am so happy Mott is here to talk about it, because they are wonderful at explaining this, and it's going to be a really, really great show. So if you ever wanted to draw people, especially in perspective, and get them proportionally correct, make sure to join us next week. And I hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you. Bye!